Dodd-Frank. My thoughts are this. It's such an enormous piece of legislation. There is absolutely no way that I can speak to how that is going to affect all financial services industries that are going to be regulated by this. But I will speak to how it represents mortgage lending. And let's face it, something had to happen. We lost our way in terms of being able to provide the sound basis for lending money, and that is, does somebody have the ability and the willingness to pay somebody back? And as soon as you stop verifying somebody's income and you stop caring about how they pay their bills, it's very hard to answer that question. So I think Dodd-Frank caused lenders to take a step back and actually start asking that question. So to that point, I think it does have its merits. Unfortunately, there's unintended consequences from this, that being those individuals that wrote and are now in the process of implementing this regulation never worked in our industries, didn't have any background in it. And so while the consumer's best interest is definitely at the forefront, unfortunately, the process that lenders are now having to go through to implement these are having some unintended consequences. In the most recent case of TRID, or Know Before You Owe, the unintended consequences could be delayed closings because the individuals that wrote this legislation didn't necessarily understand the home closing process. And so to that effect, I think Dodd-Frank is ultimately a good thing. However, it's the implementation of it that I think needs to be worked through, and then ultimately the consumer, I think, will benefit from it. Do I think that Dodd-Frank is going to limit homeownership or the ability to obtain financing? I don't believe it does. Like I said, Dodd-Frank is really there to protect the consumer, and the majority of what we've seen come through this actually is protecting the consumer. Where the unintended consequence then becomes, though, is Dodd-Frank didn't tell a lender how they should or shouldn't qualify somebody, but it did put into place a lot of compliance, check and balance, and quality control issues that weren't there before, and with that comes cost. And so what we're going to see is the consumer is probably going to start feeling some of that added cost in the mortgage lending process. And so while I don't think it stymies home ownership, it definitely is going to add a little bit of additional cost in obtaining a mortgage loan.